Here's how I think about it, and this was reflected in my tax plan. If you are making $150,000 a year or less as a family, then you're middle class.
Middle class.
Or you may be poor, right? I mean, but 150 down, you're basically middle class. Obviously, it depends on region where you're living.
In this region, you're poor.
Yeah. Well, depends. I don't know what housing prices have been doing lately. I would argue that if you're making more than $250,000, then you're in the top 3-4% of this country. You're doing well. Now, these things are all relative, and I'm not suggesting that everybody who's making over $250,000 is living on easy street. But the question that I think we have to ask ourselves is, if we believe in good schools, if we believe in good roads, if we want to make sure that kids can go to college, if we don't want to leave a mountain of debt for the next generation, then we've got to pay for these things. They don't come for free. And it is irresponsible, I believe it is irresponsible intergenerationally for us to invest or for us to spend $10 billion a month on a war and not have a way of paying for it. That I think is unacceptable. So nobody likes to pay taxes. I haven't sold 25 million books, but I've been selling some books lately. And so I write a pretty big check to Uncle Sam. Nobody likes it. What I can say is that under the approach I'm taking, if you make $150,000 or less, you will see a tax cut. If you're making $250,000 a year or more, you're going to see a modest increase. What I'm trying to do is create a sense of balance and fairness in our tax code. One thing I think we can all agree on is that it should be simpler so that you don't have all these loopholes and big stacks of stuff that you've got to comb through, which wastes a huge amount of money and allows special interests to take advantage of things that ordinary people cannot take advantage of.
Right. Okay, we'll be right back. In this last section, I want us to talk about America's responsibility to the rest of the world. We are the most blessed nation in the world, and we're blessed to be a blessing. To whom much is given, much is required. So let's just go down some of those issues, international issues. First thing, let's just talk about war. As an American, what's worth dying for? What's worth sacrificing American lives for?
Well, obviously, American freedom, American lives, America's national interests. I was just with my family on vacation in Hawaii and visited the place where my grandfather is laid to rest, the Punch Bowl National Cemetery. And then went out to the Arizona, out in Pearl Harbor. And you're reminded of the sacrifice that have been made on behalf of our freedom, and I think that is a solemn obligation that we all have. I think we also have forged alliances with countries, NATO being a prime example, where we have pledged to act militarily for the common defense. That is in our national interest, and that is something that I think that we have to abide by.
What would be the criteria that you would commit troops to end the genocide? For instance, like what's going on in Darfur, or could happen in Georgia or anywhere else? A mass killing.
I don't think that there is a hard and fast line at which you say, okay, we are going in. I think it is always a judgment call. I think that the basic principle has to be that if we have it within our power to prevent mass killing and genocide, and we can work in concert with the international community to prevent it, then we should act. Now we have to do so. I think that international component is very critical. We may not get 100% agreement.
Would you ever
but
go to the war without UN approval?
Oh yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, but I think you take an example like Bosnia, when we went in and undoubtedly saved lives. We did not have UN approval, but there was a strong international case that had been made that ethnic cleansing was taking place, and under those circumstances, when we have it within our power, we should take action.
Okay, this one's dear to my heart. Most people don't know that there are 148 million orphans in the world. 148 million kids growing up without mommies and dads. They don't need to be in an orphanage, they need to be in families. Right. But a lot of families can't afford to take these kids in. Right. Would you be willing to consider and even commit to doing some kind of emergency plan for orphans like President Bush did with AIDS? Almost a president's emergency plan for orphans to deal with this issue.
Yeah. I cheated a little bit. I actually looked at this idea ahead of time, and I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that we should sit down and figure out, working between non-governmental organizations, international institutions, the U.S. government, try to figure out what can we do. I think that part of our plan, though, has to be how do we prevent more orphans in the first place. And that means that we're helping to build a public health infrastructure around the world, that we are building on the great work that you, and by the way, this president has done when it comes to AIDS funding around the world. I think I'm often a critic of President Bush, but I think the PEPFAR program has saved lives and has done very good work. And he deserves enormous credit for that.
Religious persecution. What do you think the U.S. should do to end religious persecution, for instance, in China, in Iraq, and in many of our supposed allies? I'm not just talking about persecution of Christianity, but there's religious persecution around the world that persecutes millions of people.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is to bear witness and speak out, and not pretend that it's not taking place. Our relationship with China, for example, is a very complicated one. We're trading partners. Unfortunately, they are now lenders to us because we haven't been taking care of our economy the way we need to be. I don't think any of us want to see military conflict with China. So we want to manage this relationship and move them into the world community as a full partner. But we can't purchase that by ignoring the very real persecutions that are taking place. And so having an administration that's speaking out, joining in international forums where we can point out human rights abuses and the absence of religious freedom, that I think is absolutely critical. Over time, what we are doing is setting up new norms and creating a universal principle that people's faith and people's beliefs have to be protected. And as you said, it's not just Christians. And we've got to make sure, one thing that I think is very important for us to do on all these issues is to lead by example. I mean, that's why I think it's so important for us to have religious tolerance here in the United States. That's why it's so important for us when we are criticizing other countries about rule of law, to make sure that we're abiding by rule of law and habeas corpus, and we're not engaging in torture, because that gives us a moral standing to talk about these other issues.
Okay, another issue. The third largest and the fastest growing criminal industry in the world is human trafficking.